Next on Currents News, Vice President Mike Pence announcing just hours ago that Turkey's president has agreed to a temporary ceasefire in Syria. The war has been putting Christians and other civilian lives in danger.
I pray for the president all the time, and I tell him that. I pray for his safety and that of his family.
Nancy Pelosi offering prayers for the president. At the same time, House Democrats are trying to impeach him. Baltimore Congressman Elijah Cummings has passed away. We remember the Christian advocate for the poor.
He was very warm and welcoming and open.
Father James Martin is here to tell us about his encounter with Pope Francis. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Tamara Lane. A major breakthrough tonight. The United States and Turkey are agreeing to a ceasefire in Syria. It'll last only 120 hours, enough time for the Kurds to withdraw from the area. The pause is coming as Christians and other civilians were caught in the crossfire. Nadia Romero reports the very latest.
Cameras were not allowed inside during the majority of the U.S.-Turkey ceasefire negotiations. But right after the hours-long meeting between Turkey and the U.S., Vice President Pence spoke to reporters claiming victory.
Turkey and the United States of America have agreed to a ceasefire in Syria. It will be a pause in military operations for 120 hours while the United States facilitates the withdrawal of YPG from the affected areas in the safe zone. And once that is completed, Turkey has agreed to a permanent ceasefire.
President Trump touting the deal after landing in Texas for a fundraiser and campaign rally.
This is an amazing outcome.
Vice President Pence says U.S. sanctions placed on Turkey last week will be lifted once the ceasefire becomes permanent. That could happen after Kurdish-led forces leave the safe zone.
I know it's already underway as we speak.
Turkish officials got exactly what they wanted out of the meeting. But later, Turkey's foreign minister saying in a press conference, quote, "This is not a ceasefire." Before the deal was announced, the House approved a resolution opposing President Trump's decision to remove U.S. troops from Syria. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi saying it could lead to a possible resurgence of ISIS.
Calls for the president to show a clear plan for how Americans will be protected from ISIS.
In Washington, Nadia Romero, Currents News.
Ahead of tonight's temporary ceasefire, the United States Bishops' Conference called for prayers. The Archbishop for Military Services put out a statement that urged worship and warned the Turkish military operation makes worse an already fragile humanitarian situation in northeast Syria and northern Iraq. The ancient Christians and other religious minorities who have called this region home for millennia are at risk of being lost forever. Now for more breaking news out of the White House. The chief of staff is admitting that military aid was held up to force Ukraine to investigate corruption. Mick Mulvaney told reporters that President Trump wanted Democrats scrutinized.
Did he also mention to me in the past the corruption related to the DNC server? Absolutely. No question about that. But that's it. And that's why we held up the money. Now, there was a report.
So the demand for an investigation into the Democrats was part of the reason that he ordered to withhold funding to Ukraine.
The look back to what happened in 2016 certainly was part of the thing that he was worried about in corruption with that nation.
Mulvaney also announced that the president's Doral Golf Resort in Florida will be the site of next year's G7 summit. Mulvaney said Trump will not make any money off the event. Tonight, the country is mourning the death of longtime Democratic Congressman Elijah Cummings. A much-admired civil rights reformer and a fierce defender of his beloved Baltimore, he helped calm anti-police protests there following the death of Freddie Gray. While he was a frequent critic of President Trump, he was also known for working across the aisle with dignity and civility.
God has called me to this moment. I did not ask for it.
The flag, normally flying high above the White House, lowered to half-staff today in honor of one of America's staunchest civil rights advocates.
I had my turn. I want them to have their turn.
Elijah Cummings, a Christian and longtime representative from Maryland, died this morning. The reason described only as complications concerning long-standing health challenges, is being remembered as a deeply spiritual man and a leader of towering character.
He lived the American dream, and he wanted it for everyone else. He spoke with unsurpassed clarity and moral integrity.
President Trump tweeting condolences to the family, noting his strength, passion, and wisdom, writing his work and voice on so many fronts will be very hard, if not impossible, to replace. He was a tireless advocate for the poor and campaigner for social justice. As the chairman of the House Committee on Oversight and Reform, he used the powerful position fighting for justice and democracy and to investigate the president and his administration.
When they begin to investigate you, it's like a ball of yarn. It just keeps going and going and going, and they may run into all kinds of things. And so we're just going to have to wait and see.
The son of sharecroppers whose parents eventually became preachers. His faith always central in his life and his life's work.
He would go to church every Sunday in Baltimore when he could, when he wasn't traveling. He was a very compassionate man, someone who was very spiritual, and someone who was a fighter.
A fighter who battled tirelessly for the Baltimore community he loved and represented for more than 2 decades. Not recently seen on Capitol Hill because of illness, his booming voice undeniably resonates within the halls of Congress, forever challenging his colleagues and the nation.
When we're dancing with the angels, the question will be asked, in 2019, what did we do to make sure we kept our democracy intact?
Elijah Cummings was 68 years old. His seat will remain vacant until Maryland's Republican governor calls for a special election no earlier than February. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is praying for President Trump after the political rivals had a contentious meeting at the White House. Democrats walked out of a session about the Syrian crisis. Now she's taking a different approach.
I pray for the president all the time, and I tell him that. I pray for his safety and that of his family. I think now we have to pray for his health, because this was a very serious meltdown on the part of the president.
Pelosi is offering prayers for the president at the same time House Democrats are trying to impeach him. As for his part, Trump said it was Pelosi who had the meltdown. Now to news out of Chicago. A teacher's strike kept nearly 400,000 students out of their classrooms today. The strike comes after 10 months of failed negotiations between the mayor and the teachers union. More than 25,000 educators have now joined picket lines in the nation's 3rd largest school district, and no one is sure when they'll return back to work. They're demanding higher pay and smaller class sizes. They also want nurses, social workers, and librarians in every school, among other things. It's the first time they've gone on strike since 2012. Meanwhile, a new study shows the job market is all work and no employees. Across the U.S., businesses are struggling to find workers. Reed Binion reports that increasing legal immigration could be the best fix.
Now hiring. According to June data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, in 39 states there are more jobs than there are people looking for work. And economists say the shortage is due in large part to the baby boomer generation retiring by the millions.
And because of that, the working age population in America is growing much more slowly, only about 0.2% per year this decade.
The labor shortage is being felt in all sectors, but especially in education. According to September federal labor statistics, there's currently a 307,000 job shortfall in public education that can't keep up with growing student enrollment. And recent teacher strikes in several states reveal the reason many applicants are staying away: low pay and lack of resources. Meanwhile, David Kelly, chief global strategist with J.P. Morgan Chase, argues that increasing legal immigration could help replace America's aging workforce.
So what you need to do, in fact, over the next decade is increase immigration, maybe from 1 million a year to 2 million a year. If you did that, you could actually grow the working age population.
He also suggests making 3-year college degrees more available and even delaying eligibility for Medicare benefits to retirees by 1 year until the age of 66. Reed Binion, Currents News.
4 priests from the New York Archdiocese are on leave tonight following allegations of abuse with minors dating back decades. The 3 pastors and 1 cleric in charge of priest personnel have all had their ministries restricted following recent accusations. According to Cardinal Timothy Dolan, their cases have been sent to the district attorney's office, and the Archdiocese will also independently investigate. His Eminence stated that priest leave is not a punishment and that they continue to have the presumption of innocence. A new religion is gaining ground across the U.S., and it's on the brink of outpacing Catholics. They're being called nuns, a term taken from the phrase none of the above. The new identifier applies to people who don't follow any faith, and according to the Pew Research Center, that group is on the fast track. In the last 50 years, the number of nuns has grown from 5% to 23%. In that same time, Catholics have dropped from 27% to 24%. There is still some hope in the new study. 53% of people who were raised as nuns have now taken a religion. The study attributes the rise of nuns to the decline in the institution of marriage and backlash to the entanglement of religion and politics. Stay with us for stories you'll only see on Currents News. Father James Martin is up next to tell us all about his important meeting with Pope Francis.
We first showed you the video when he returned from Afghanistan. Now I'm catching up with a Catholic Academy student and her military father to see what they've been up to since they've been reunited. I'm Tim Harfman, and I'll have more.
And it's known as the Church of Bones, and it has a new policy likely to disappoint tourists. The meeting made headlines around the world. Pope Francis sat down with Father James Martin, a Jesuit who's one of America's most prominent priests. Father Martin is a hero to many LGBT Catholics. He's called for a warmer welcome of the LGBT community in the church and for the recognition of their full humanity. Father Martin is the editor-at-large for the Jesuit magazine America, and he joins us now from his Manhattan office. Father Martin, thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
You spent 30 minutes with the Holy Father in a private audience. It must have been really exciting. What did you want to see from the Pope?
It was very exciting and very unexpected. Basically, I just wanted to tell stories of LGBT Catholics to him and be their voice in the Vatican. And he was very warm and welcoming and open. So it was a wonderful meeting, and I left very inspired and encouraged.
You tweeted that the meeting was one of the highlights of your life, and you felt encouraged, consoled, and inspired by your conversation with the Holy Father. What reactions have you been getting since the tweet?
Very positive. I think for particularly LGBT Catholics who sometimes feel that they don't have a voice in the church, they felt really heard. And one of the things the Pope did that I thought was really significant is that not only did he meet me in a public setting, but he also put it on his schedule. And so I think he really wanted people to know of his care and concern for these members of his flock.
Your well-known book about building bridges between the LGBT community and the church has sparked a lot of feedback. Have you seen any noticeable changes in the relationship between the LGBT community and Catholics since your writing was published in 2017?
That's a great question. I don't know if it's directly a result of the book, but I think really as more and more people are open about who they are, open about being gay, for example, more and more families are affected. More and more of us know people who are LGBT. And that means that more and more parishes are affected and more dioceses are affected. And I really think that's kind of what accounts for a little bit of a warming attitude in the church. And also, you have more bishops and cardinals who are a little bit more friendly to this population.
Did you see a warming coming from the Vatican?
Well, I did. I think that the Pope's meeting was a real significant step. And then the next day, I met with the Vatican's Congregation for Education to talk to them about issues of sexuality and even gender. And they were they allowed me to tweet out the fact that they were open to dialogue. So I think, just like people in the United States, people in the Vatican know more and more people in their families and in their, regular lives. And so I think that is one of the sort of accounting for the warming and the greater sense of welcome, I think.
Going back to your book for a minute, the book also unleashed criticism from some conservatives opposed to your position. Do you think the meeting with the Pope serves as an endorsement of your ministry?
I would say it's certainly a sign of the Pope's support. People who were against the ministry are usually against Pope Francis, not all the time. And so I saw a lot of people, some people online who are still upset about it. But I mean, I want to say to somebody, you know, who's Catholic, I mean, if the Pope meeting with you for 30 minutes isn't some sort of sign that it might be a good idea to maybe read the book or take these things seriously, I don't know what else could be.
So what are you saying now to the LGBT Catholics who are faithful yet often feel alienated from the church?
That the Pope hears them and the Pope listens to them. And I always tell people the most basic thing I focus on is baptism. I always say, look, you're baptized, you were called into the church by Jesus Christ like everyone else is at their baptism. And that's your groundedness in the church. And so you are just as much a part of the church as Pope Francis, as your local bishop, as your pastor, as your parents, or as me. And I think people really have to be reminded of that because oftentimes people treat them like they're not Catholic. And so for me, baptism is really the beginning of that vocation as a Catholic and as a Christian.
What do you think are the next steps for acceptance?
I think basically just listening. I think, as I said, most LGBT people don't feel listened to or welcomed. And, you know, something simple as bishops listening to them more, pastors meeting with them more, and, you know, as you've said very well, you know, treating them like fully human people. I mean, the catechism, and, you know, this is presenting any challenge of church teaching on anything, but the catechism talks about treating them with respect, compassion, and sensitivity. And certainly all of those things, you know, mean that we listen to them and we sort of try to understand their own experiences, and particularly their experiences of God and of the church.
Father James Martin, editor-at-large at America Magazine, thanks for being with us today.
My pleasure.
An update tonight on a heartwarming reunion between a dad and daughter. First reported on Currents News. Navy Commander Cornelius Murray is having a wonderful time with Holly after surprising her when he returned home from a long deployment in Afghanistan. As Currents News' Tim Harfman reports, being together again is something they had long prayed for.
That's the photo that your mother sent to the school.
A military father and his daughter are together again after being apart for months.
It's just kind of like back to normal, basically.
Holly Murray is a 7th grader at St. Francis de Sales Catholic Academy in Bell Harbor, Queens. Her dad, Navy Commander Cornelius Murray, had been working with Afghan forces inside the country until he was able to come home. We first showed you their emotional reunion last week. A dad surprising his girl when he unexpectedly arrived in her science class. Now they're enjoying their time together. Holly is saying life is much better now that he's home.
Kind of just like being able to be around him more, and like there's so much less stress.
Throughout his 30 years in the service, Commander Murray was deployed to Afghanistan, Iraq, and on the Indian Ocean.
Out of the 4 deployments I've been on, this was the hardest one. So it was very emotional coming home this time.
A return the Murrays had been praying for.
When I landed in Bagram Airfield in Afghanistan, one of the first places I went to was the chapel.
I just always pray to God that he was safe. And obviously my prayers were answered.
Commander Murray remains on active duty, but he's hoping to be near his family for at least the next 5 years. In Bell Harbor, Queens, Tim Harfman, Currents News.
Another Currents News story, unfortunately, has a less happy ending. Maria Berrigan has returned to the Lord. The Brooklyn mother of 2 boys was battling terminal cancer while fighting to bring her deported husband home. That was her dying wish, to be with him again, and it was granted. Benjamin was at her side when she passed away on October 3rd. He had been ordered out of the U.S. for illegally crossing the border with Mexico. Today, he's still in New York with his kids. Family and friends are fighting to extend Benjamin's stay. Immigration officials are reviewing the case, and we'll keep you posted. Still to come on Currents News. School children in the Amazon are taking special steps to protect the environment, and they're expecting visitors to do the same. A church known for its spooky setting has a new policy, and tourists beware. And please check out one of the latest features in the tablet, the Our Diocesan Family page. That's where you can send in photos of your family receiving certain sacraments, such as baptism, first communion, confirmation, and marriage. For more information and to submit your pictures, go to thetablet.org/ourdiocesanfamily. We'll be right back. Pope Francis is leading a historic summit on the Amazon at the Vatican. At the same time, Catholic school children living in the region are doing their best to make a difference, and they're already accomplishing a lot. Melissa Butts has more on the story.
Walking into this school is like walking into a real garden. It's the Internado Indígena San Francisco de Loreto Yaco. The Daughters of Charity of St. Vincent de Paul have managed the school for 20 years. They established a rule that all visitors must follow.
Each person who enters must plant a tree. This oxygen plan has 3 dimensions. Plant 1 tree for personal oxygen, 2 trees for the family, and 3 for the whole world.
This has been done by the more than 400 students, boys and girls. 120 of them live on campus, and 300 come from the indigenous communities surrounding Puerto Narnio, Colombia. In addition to their regular courses, all students learn to protect the environment.
We are a green school. The center was completely deforested. We started the reforestation process about 17 years ago. We have planted more than 14,000 trees in this area alone. We also promote this in the communities where we work. We're teaching these ethnic cultures to love the environment and the plants. We're teaching them to discover and get to know them.
This is why the students are increasingly aware of the harmful impact of the deforestation of the Amazon on their future and their nature-focused culture. For years, Sister Edelmira has been teaching new generations the principles in the encyclical Laudato Si, even before it was written by Pope Francis. The comprehensive development of the Amazon's inhabitants depends on the care of their shared home.
Fighting for cultures and for biodiversity is worth it. Faced with so many economic hardships, the people choose to destroy the environment. If they have other means to survive, then they will be the protectors of the planet. In order to flourish, these cultures must stay on their land. They must love their land. Their land is green. That's why the church and the world must take a chance.
This green school would like to be a message for the Synod in Rome. Everything that is planted in fertile Amazonian land, with a little attention and dedication, will sprout. In Rome, Melissa Butts, Currents News.
Finally tonight, a church known for its spooky setting is putting a new policy in place that probably won't make tourists happy. It's the Church of Bones, and it's starting soon. They'll be banning selfies. The chapel is below the Church of All Saints in the Czech Republic, and it features the bones of nearly 60,000 skeletons. Every year, about 500,000 tourists visit and snap selfies. But church officials want to keep everything respectful, so starting next year, no selfies unless visitors get permission 3 days ahead of time. That is Currents News. I am Tamara Lane. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.